Strike first, ask questions later. That appears to be the message echoing from Washington right now. A stark, unambiguous warning just dropped. If Iran blocks the Strait of Hormuz, the response won't be diplomacy. It won't be sanctions. It will be bombs. Hell for Iran's oil infrastructure. And the question on everyone's mind, are U.S. warships being rushed to the Gulf right now to make that threat real? Welcome to Power Clash Report. We are breaking down one of the most direct and consequential statements in recent U.S. foreign policy. We are moving beyond the sound bites to examine what this warning actually means, the strategic logic behind it, and the very real risks of escalation it carries. We will analyze the importance of the Strait of Hormuz, Iran's capabilities to disrupt it, the U.S. military posture in the region, and the global economic stakes. And we will answer the question that matters most. Is this a credible deterrent designed to prevent a blockade, or a rhetorical trap that could make conflict more likely? Stay with me until the end, because understanding this statement is not just about geopolitics. It is about the price you pay for fuel, the stability of global markets, and the fragile line between deterrence and war. Let us begin with the statement itself. In a recent address, former President Donald Trump issued a clear conditional threat. If Iran moves to block the Strait of Hormuz, the United States will respond with overwhelming force against Iran's oil infrastructure. The language used was deliberate and stark. Bomb Iran oil hell. This is not a vague warning. It is a specific retaliatory doctrine. You close the strait, we destroy your oil economy. The statement also raised the question of immediate naval deployment. Warships needed now? This suggests a potential rapid reinforcement of U.S. naval assets in the Persian Gulf to both deter a blockade and enable rapid strike capabilities if the red line is crossed. Now, let us examine the strategic context. The Strait of Hormuz is not just another waterway. It is the world's most critical oil choke point. Approximately 21 million barrels of oil per day pass through this narrow strait, roughly 20% of global petroleum consumption. It is also the primary export route for liquefied natural gas from Qatar, the world's largest LNG exporter. For Iran, the strait is both a vulnerability and a lever. It is vulnerable because its own oil exports depend on the same passage. But it is also a lever because threatening to close it gives Tehran a form of asymmetric power far beyond its conventional military strength. Iran has demonstrated this capability before, through naval exercises simulating mine-laying, swarms of fast attack craft, and anti-ship missile tests. The threat is credible not because Iran could permanently seal the strait, but because even a temporary disruption would send shockwaves through global energy markets. Trump's warning flips this logic. It says, if you use the strait as a weapon, we will use your oil infrastructure as a target. This is a strategy of symmetrical retaliation. You attack our economic lifeline, we attack yours. The goal is deterrence through clarity. By stating the consequence in advance, the hope is to make the cost of blocking the strait so prohibitive that Iran never attempts it. This is classic coercive diplomacy, defining a red line and promising a severe response to prevent an adversary from crossing it. But deterrence is a delicate game. For it to work, the threat must be credible, the red line must be clear, and the adversary must believe you will follow through. Trump's statement checks the first two boxes. The threat is specific, and the red line blocking Hormuz is unambiguous. The third box, credibility, depends on perceived resolve and capability. The United States unquestionably has the military capability to strike Iranian oil infrastructure. The question is whether Iran believes the U.S. would actually do it, given the risks of escalation, global market disruption, and potential retaliation. Let us talk about the military dimension. The U.S. Fifth Fleet, headquartered in Bahrain, maintains a significant naval presence in the Persian Gulf. This includes aircraft carriers, guided missile destroyers, cruisers, and support vessels. These assets are designed for power projection, maritime security, and rapid strike operations. If warships needed now translates into a surge deployment, it would signal heightened readiness and a tangible reinforcement of the deterrent threat. However, concentrating more high-value assets in a confined waterway also increases their vulnerability to asymmetric threats: mines, drones, fast attack craft, and anti-ship missiles. This creates a paradox. Reinforcing deterrence can also increase the stakes of any incident. Now, let us address Iran's perspective. From Tehran's viewpoint, the Strait of Hormuz is a strategic asset of last resort. It is not a tool for casual coercion, but a potential response to an existential threat, such as a major attack on Iranian nuclear facilities or regime leadership. Iran has repeatedly stated that it does not seek to close the strait under normal circumstances. However, it reserves the right to do so if its survival is at stake. Trump's warning, therefore, may be perceived in Tehran not as a deterrent, but as an ultimatum. You cannot use your ultimate lever, even in self-defense. This could harden Iranian resolve, incentivize preemptive actions, or push Tehran to develop alternative asymmetric responses, such as cyber attacks, proxy strikes, or targeted harassment of commercial shipping below the threshold of a full blockade. Let us examine the economic stakes, because this is where the impact becomes personal. If Iran were to block the Strait of Hormuz, even temporarily, oil prices would spike immediately. Analysts project Brent crude could surge past $150 per barrel within days. For consumers, this means higher gasoline prices, increased heating costs, and broader inflationary pressure. For businesses, it means higher transportation and manufacturing expenses, squeezing margins and potentially triggering layoffs. For developing nations that rely on affordable energy imports, it means a heightened risk of social unrest and economic instability. Conversely, if the U.S. follows through on its threat and bombs Iranian oil infrastructure, the supply shock could be even more severe. Iran produces approximately 4 to 5 million barrels per day of crude and condensates. Removing that supply from the market, even partially, would tighten global balances and push prices higher. This is the cruel paradox of economic warfare in an interconnected world. Actions intended to punish an adversary can inflict collateral damage on the global economy, including the citizens of the punishing nation. Now let us talk about the human dimension. Behind every strategic calculation are real people whose lives are shaped by conflict. In Iran, workers at oil facilities face the threat of airstrikes. In Gulf Arab states, communities dependent on stable energy flows worry about economic disruption. In the United States, families of deployed service members live with heightened anxiety. And globally, consumers feel the pinch of rising energy costs. The human cost of escalation is not abstract. It is measured in livelihoods, in mental health, in the daily struggle to afford basics. At Power Clash Report, we commit to covering the strategy without losing sight of the stakes. We will verify before we amplify, and we will humanize before we politicize. There is also the information warfare dimension. In the digital age, statements like Trump's are not just policy signals, they are narrative weapons. The phrase, "bomb Iran, oil hell," is designed for maximum psychological impact. It is simple, visceral, and memorable. It projects resolve to domestic audiences, deters adversaries through ambiguity about timing and scale, and shapes international perception of U.S. seriousness. However, such rhetoric also carries risks. It can box leaders into corners, reduce diplomatic flexibility, and incentivize adversaries to act preemptively before the threat materializes. As consumers of information, our responsibility is to seek verification, consult credible sources, and understand the difference between a deterrent threat and an imminent action plan. Let us consider the regional implications. Gulf Arab states like Saudi Arabia, the UAE, and Qatar are caught in a difficult position. They rely on U.S. security guarantees, but also seek to avoid becoming battlegrounds in a U.S.-Iran conflict. A U.S. strike on Iranian oil infrastructure could trigger Iranian retaliation against Gulf energy facilities, as seen in past attacks on Saudi oil plants. This would directly threaten their economies and stability. Moreover, the call for warships needed now could be interpreted as preparation for conflict, prompting regional allies to either bolster their own defenses or seek diplomatic off-ramps to avoid being drawn in. The region is a complex web of alliances, rivalries, and interdependent security concerns. A single statement from Washington can ripple through this web in unpredictable ways. What about the global response? Major oil-importing nations like China and India have significant stakes in the free flow of Hormuz. They have repeatedly called for restraint and diplomacy. A U.S.-Iran escalation that disrupts oil flows would strain their economies and could push them to mediate or, conversely, to deepen ties with Iran as a counterbalance. European nations already navigating energy transitions would face renewed inflationary pressure and potential social strain. The international community would likely urge de-escalation, but without leverage over either Washington or Tehran, diplomatic efforts may struggle to gain traction. So what happens next? There are several possible scenarios. In the most contained, Trump's warning serves its deterrent purpose. Iran avoids blocking the strait, the U.S. does not strike, and the crisis de-escalates through back-channel diplomacy. In a more escalatory scenario, a miscalculation or provocative act leads to a Hormuz disruption, triggering U.S. strikes on Iranian oil infrastructure and a cycle of retaliation that expands the conflict. In a diplomatic scenario, third-party mediators, perhaps Oman, Qatar, or the UN, intervene to clarify red lines, establish crisis communication channels, and create face-saving off-ramps for both sides. The outcome depends on intelligence assessments, political calculations, and the fragile mechanisms of crisis management. What can you do as an informed citizen? First, stay informed through credible sources. Follow official statements from governments, international organizations, and reputable news agencies. Be skeptical of viral claims that lack verification. Second, understand the broader context. This is not an isolated statement. It is part of a long history of coercive diplomacy, deterrence theory, and energy geopolitics. Third, engage constructively. Share verified information. Support policies that prioritize diplomatic solutions and civilian protection. Advocate for clarity in crisis communication to reduce the risk of miscalculation. At Power Clash Report, we believe that knowledge is power. Understanding geopolitical events helps us make better decisions, protect our families, and contribute to a more stable world. Before we conclude, let us recap the key points. Trump has issued a conditional threat. If Iran blocks the Strait of Hormuz, the U.S. will bomb Iran's oil infrastructure. The Strait of Hormuz is a critical global oil choke point, and Iran possesses asymmetric capabilities to disrupt it. The warning is designed as a deterrent, but carries risks of escalation, economic shock, and regional instability. The call for warships needed now signals potential military reinforcement, but also increases the stakes of any incident. The human and economic costs of escalation are substantial, affecting civilians, workers, consumers, and global stability. The path forward depends on verification, restraint, and responsible communication from all parties. The choice before the world's leaders is stark. They can allow fear and rhetoric to drive policy, risking a spiral of escalation, or they can rely on intelligence, verification, and strategic patience to manage crises without surrendering to panic. History will judge this moment not by the threats issued, but by the wisdom with which they are answered. As citizens of an interconnected world, we have both the right and the responsibility to demand clarity over chaos, evidence over emotion, and truth over virality. If this analysis provided value, please like this video, subscribe to Power Clash Report, and share it with someone who needs to understand these developments. Turn on notifications so you do not miss our updates as this story evolves. In the description below, you will find links to official sources, energy market data, and further reading on this developing situation. We are committed to bringing you signal in a world of noise. Thank you for watching. Stay informed, stay safe. And remember, in a world of increasing uncertainty, clarity is the most valuable asset we have.